I just finished reading The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson for the second time in 7 years or so, and I'm here to tell you all about it. Given that it is the second book in a trilogy, I'm not going to focus too much on a spoiler-free section, and given that it's a reread, I'm also going to put a spoiler warning for the entire trilogy as a whole. So first of all, my experience rereading this book, this time in audible format. Once again, Michael Kramer is an incredible narrator, and I really enjoy his narration style and voices he gives the character. I think he really brings the work to life. But the main thing I have to say in regards to rereading this book is that I might as well have been reading it for the first time, because while I know the general shape of the story and I know some of the most important plot beats and stuff in regards to the trilogy as a whole, I remembered almost nothing about this book except for the very end. And even then, the ending had a lot more nuance to it than I remembered the details of. And you know, a lot of it is I remember it as it happens. Tyndall shows up and I'm like, oh yeah, Tyndall, I remember Tyndall. She dies and I'm like, oh yeah, right, of course, she dies. I forgot about that, but now I haven't. It really is kind of a surreal experience, but not so much so that it took me out of the story. As a book in and of itself, I do think it struggles a little bit with middle book syndrome that every trilogy has, in that you have the first book being almost self-contained with a very strong introduction to the premise and a solid ending and everything like that, and then the final book in the trilogy is going to be something that ties together a lot of threads. It's going to be something that is the big main plot thing that gets resolved and all of that, and that leaves the second book to be more world building, exploration of characters, building upon things from the first book in greater detail, and sometimes that can make it feel like it's dragging a little. I don't think The Well of Ascension ever really dragged. I think it's a very well-paced book, but I do think that by the very nature of its existence and what it had to do, I think that the A-plot in terms of the besieged Luthadel, I think, you know, that's not as interesting as the B-plot, which ties into the overall storyline with what's going on with the Well of Ascension, what happened with the Hero of Ages, and all the prophecy stuff. But because the besieged Luthadel plot is in the foreground and is the focus of most of the book, sometimes it can feel like, while I'm more interested in the B-plot stuff, I feel like I'm being made to wait for it. Ultimately, this might just be me being an impatient reader, because you need the A-plot to be well written and well fleshed out to make the B-plot have weight to it. What's the point of caring about a world that doesn't get fleshed out enough for you to know about it? This isn't really a criticism I have of the book. In fact, I rated it 5 stars just because of how it ended up. But it's definitely something that I noticed as a quirk of my reread. I was like, yeah, okay, great, Ellen's struggling being a king, get to the good stuff. And that was with me enjoying watching Ellen struggle with, you know, balancing his idealism with his need to be a strong king. That stuff was still good and was still interesting, don't get me wrong. I just spent most of the time going, wait, what's the deal with this mist spirit again? Wait, hang on a minute, wait, hang on, no, go back to that. This book does end up being a deconstruction of the idea of prophecy, and it does it in a really interesting way. Stuff that still hasn't entirely been revealed and will continue to be explored in the third book, which I also have great big swathes of missing memories of, that time has snatched from me, so we will be treating it like spoilers here. But stuff like not being able to trust things that aren't written in steel, like some mysterious force editing written works and things that have been stored in metal mines, and how this force has been subtly playing with the Terrace religion and the Terrace prophecies to manipulate it into being freed from its prison within the Well of Ascension. It's such a good deconstruction of those ideas of, you know, predestination and fated heroes, and you know, you have to give up the power for the greater good, except actually doing that is releasing the thing from its prison. You're actually supposed to hold on to the power and use it in order to, I don't know, exhaust the power and keep it imprisoned. We still don't know the details. But yeah, I forgot enough about this story to be surprised by the revelations, and as I mentioned in the previous video, I'm glad that I did. The ability to forget some of the twists in one of your favorite books and then go back to it and re-experience it again 7 years later, that is such a boon. I get to enjoy this book twice. I get to enjoy the intricacies of the plot twists twice. And this is also justifying my decision to go back and reread the original Mistborn trilogy before going forwards and reading the Wax and Wayne series, because there's some stuff that was revealed in this book which feels like it's going to have ramifications for every era of Mistborn. And again, this could just be a result of me forgetting certain events that happen in the final book, but stuff like the fact that the Well of Ascension is something that powers up every 1,000 years. In a story that has multiple eras in time and hundreds of years of history between, I have to wonder if that's going to come up again, although my instincts tell me that maybe the resolution of the third book is that they make it so that this doesn't happen over and over again. I don't remember. But I also really enjoyed the little lore tidbit of, Vin seeing the planet as a whole and seeing that people can only live at the poles. The rest of the planet is not somewhere where the climate is conducive to life, which also makes me think, are there peoples on the other side of a planet that no one's ever gotten into contact with before? That could be a fun thing to explore. Why is it that the peoples of Scadrial can only live on the poles? Is it a planetary climate thing, or is it something to do with the deepness? Is this something that gets again, we're doing full trilogy spoilers here, okay? And this is what I do remember of it. Is this something that gets solved when Sazed becomes God and remakes the world? Probably, but I don't know. Now, I don't only want to focus on the big overarching plot of this book, because I also want to talk about the continued excellence of characterization, this time in regards to Elend and Vin's relationship. In a previous video, I talked a lot about how good Vin is as a character, how good everyone in Mistborn is as a character, but specifically Vin. The character work Brandon does with her just feels so excellent, in my opinion. Like her issues with trust and how she grows to understand friendship and how her past still affects her every day. And I think it's great and natural that this would continue into her very first relationship, obviously, with Elend. Especially when Elend starts to change as a person, as Tindwyl starts teaching him how to be a good king. And especially when Zane shows up too and starts messing with Vin's perceptions and starts manipulating her into distrusting Elend. It's not done in a way that makes Vin look stupid or anything like that. It's done in a way that feels realistic based on Vin's lived experiences. And it helps that we do constantly have Vin reflect and relate back to Reen's words and her lived experiences growing up, and we constantly see her comparing the life she has now versus the life she used to have, and this identity crisis she goes through and all that. Especially considering that she's gone from street urchin to god killer, and she's kind of being worshipped by the people. Side note, I can't remember if this is something that gets revealed later or if this is just a theory I had that never got proven true, but the whole thing about revealing that Zane, the voices he heard in his head were due to the steel spike he had in his chest, I can't help but wonder if the fact that Vin hears Reen's voice in her head might be something to do with the earring she wears, but anyway, that's for another time. It also just goes to show how important communication is in any relationship, because a lot of this shit could have been sorted out if they communicated, but then it also goes to show how difficult it can be to communicate when your own insecurities take control. It just feels very realistically written. I also loved Sazed and Tindwyl in this book and exploring why they're not together, and just how Tindwyl feels about Sazed and how Sazed is regarded by fellow keepers and stuff like that, and how that feeds into some of the insecurities Sazed has, and the tragedy of their relationship when Tindwyl dies in this book is so sad. When he finds her body, that was a really emotionally effective scene. Also, I gotta say, the whole Kolos invading Luthadel thing, that was a really fun set piece. That was a really fun kind of almost climax, not quite climax to the book. The stakes felt really high. It was really interesting losing clubs and seeing how that affected Breeze, and also losing Doxin and seeing how Doxin reacted to his imminent defeat and stuff like that. Another part of this book I really enjoyed was exploring the Conjurer and exploring Vin's relationship to who she thought was Osur, and how she treated him terribly, and then figuring out why she treated him so terribly, and then her realizing what she was doing and becoming a better person about it, and the friendship she strikes up with Tensoon, the actual conjurer, and how that actually ends up feeding into him trying to work around his contract to save her life when Zane attacks her. Honestly, Vin and not Osur's conversations ended up being probably my favourite non-plot heavy parts of the book, although I did also enjoy Elend's conversations with Tindwyl. Ultimately, I did love this book. I think maybe the best way to put into words my concern with this book is the way Vin herself feels about things. At one point, Vin mentions that she's feeling frustrated because she's got all of these problems she's been working on, but she hasn't been able to reach a satisfying conclusion for any of the problems that she has. It's kind of what leads to her going and slaughtering a bunch of Setsmen, while, you know, partially that is her being manipulated by Zane. It's also the fact that she wants to do something. She's so struck by inaction of like, can't do this because that, can't do that because this, can't do this because I don't know that. And I think that is an actual problem this book has, is it spends a little bit too long maybe languishing in not being able to solve problems and telling us why you're not able to solve those problems. Again though, that's mostly a nitpick. I would still rate this book a 5 out of 5. Just barely, but I would. And I'm very excited to continue into the Hero of Ages, which I will now do. So thank you very much for listening to me ramble on about the Well of Ascension. Let me know what you thought down below if you like. Please remember we're still treating the third book as spoiler territory, even though I have technically already read it. There's bound to be things I forgot, like there were with this book. In the meantime, subscribe to this channel if you want to hear my thoughts on the Hero of Ages and future Mistborn books as well, and leave a like if you liked the video. I'm going to say these things because this is still a very new channel and I really need your help to get it into people's algorithms. Thank you very much for stopping by. I will catch you in whatever I make next.